They expelled the millionaire's disabled heir from school, but no one expected a homeless girl to shock them all. Why would a boy born into luxury be cast out for something he could never control? And how could a girl with nothing, not even a home, stand against an entire system determined to break him? It all began in one of the wealthiest corners of the city, inside the grand Blackwood estate. To outsiders, the Blackwood family lived the perfect life. Luxury cars parked in the driveway, crystal chandeliers glowing through high windows, and staff catering to their every need. But behind those polished gates lived a boy named Ethan Blackwood. He was 10 years old, polite, gentle, and brilliant for his age. Yet in the eyes of the world, Ethan was defined by one thing: his missing leg. Born with a rare condition that required amputation when he was very young, Ethan had grown up on crutches, his days filled with hospital visits and therapy. His father, Richard Blackwood, a self-made millionaire, believed money could protect his son from pain. He bought the best prosthetics, hired the best tutors, and shielded Ethan from anything unpleasant. But there are things even wealth cannot protect a child from. At school, Ethan's world was not the grand estate. It was cruel laughter, whispers behind his back, and the sharp sting of being different. Children pointed at his crutches, calling him names he didn't deserve. Teachers looked the other way. To them, he wasn't the heir to a fortune, he was a problem. And then came the day that would change everything. The morning started like any other. Ethan dressed carefully, buttoning his uniform shirt and balancing on his crutches while his nanny helped tie his shoes. He gave her a shy smile, trying to hide the nervous flutter in his stomach. Every school day felt like walking into battle. When the limousine pulled up at the private academy's grand entrance, Ethan could already feel the stares. Groups of children whispered as he passed. A few imitated his limp, laughing cruelly. Ethan lowered his head, telling himself the same words his father always did. Ignore them. You're stronger than they are. But strength only carries a child so far. That day in class, during a group project, one boy shoved Ethan aside. You're too slow. We don't want you on our team, he sneered. Laughter rippled across the room. Ethan's cheeks burned as he tried to steady himself on his crutches. The teacher, instead of defending him, sighed in annoyance. Maybe group work isn't the best for you, Ethan. Why don't you sit out today? Sit out. Again. Like he was invisible. Like he didn't matter. Ethan clenched his fists, blinking back tears. He wanted to scream that he was just as capable, just as smart, but the words stayed trapped in his throat. That afternoon, things grew worse. A few boys cornered Ethan in the hallway, mocking his crutches, chanting cruel names. When he tried to escape, one kicked the crutch from under him. Ethan crashed to the floor, pain shooting through his arm as laughter echoed around him. "Stop it," he cried, his voice shaking, but his words only fueled their cruelty. And then, footsteps. A girl's voice rang out, firm, angry, and fearless. "Leave him alone." Everyone turned. Standing there was a girl about Ethan's age. Her clothes were ragged, her hair uncombed, her backpack torn at the seams. She was clearly not from this wealthy academy. She didn't belong in these polished halls at all. Yet in that moment, she looked stronger than anyone else. Her name was Maya. No one knew exactly how she had slipped inside the school. She had no uniform, no books, no polished shoes, but she had something none of the other children did: courage. Maya stepped between Ethan and the bullies, glaring at them with fire in her eyes. "Pick on someone who can fight back," she said. The boys hesitated. This girl was smaller than them, clearly poor, yet something in her stance made them uneasy. With a mutter, they scattered, leaving Ethan trembling on the ground. Maya bent down and held out her hand. "Are you okay?" Ethan blinked, stunned. In all his years at the academy, no one had ever defended him. Slowly, he took her hand, and she helped him back onto his crutches. For the first time that day, Ethan smiled. But what Ethan didn't know was that Maya's life outside these walls was nothing like his. She had no mansion, no chauffeur, no warm meals waiting for her. Maya was homeless, living with her little brother in an abandoned building downtown. Every day was a fight for survival, finding scraps of food, avoiding trouble, keeping warm through the cold nights. And yet, despite having nothing, she had given Ethan something priceless: dignity. That evening, when Ethan returned home, his father noticed something different. His eyes weren't filled with the usual sadness. Instead, they shone with a spark of hope. Richard asked gently, "How was school today, son?" Ethan hesitated, then whispered, Someone stood up for me." Richard raised an eyebrow. He was used to solving problems with money, not kindness. "Who?" Ethan smiled faintly. "A girl. I don't even know her name." But the school wasn't done with Ethan. The bullying had been building for months, and the staff, instead of protecting him, had grown tired of his problems. The very next week, Richard received a letter. The school board had decided to expel Ethan. Their reason? They claimed his special needs disrupted the learning environment, that his presence was distracting to other students. In other words, they wanted to erase him because he didn't fit their perfect image. Richard was furious. He stormed into the principal's office, demanding answers. But the polished man behind the desk only adjusted his glasses and coldly said, "Mr. Blackwood, this school prides itself on excellence. We cannot accommodate limitations." Richard clenched his fists. "Limitations? That's my son you're talking about." But the decision was final. Ethan was expelled. And just like that, the millionaire's heir, with all his family's wealth and influence, was cast out of a place that should have protected him. What Richard didn't realize was that the fight for his son's dignity was only beginning, and the unlikely hero in that fight was a homeless girl named Maya. The letter of expulsion lay heavy in Richard Blackwood's hand, its words burning like fire across the page. He had faced ruthless businessmen, corrupt officials, and competitors who tried to destroy him, but never had he felt this powerless. His fortune had built skyscrapers, employed thousands, and shaped the city skyline. Yet all his money could not buy his son a fair chance at school. That night, as the chandelier light flickered across the dining room table, Richard watched his son push food around his plate silently. Ethan's crutches leaned against his chair. The boy's head bowed. "Ethan," Richard began gently, "we'll find you another school. A better one." But Ethan only whispered, "What's the point, Dad? They'll all hate me there, too." The words pierced Richard deeper than any business loss ever had. For the first time, he realized the one battle he couldn't fight with money, the battle inside his son's heart. The next morning, as the sun broke over the horizon, a strange visitor arrived. A girl with fiery eyes and defiant expression. Maya. "She came to see if he's okay," she said boldly, standing in the shadow of the towering gates. Richard blinked in surprise. Rarely did anyone speak to him without deference, let alone a ragged girl who looked like she hadn't eaten a full meal in days. Yet there she stood, chin high, as though she had every right to be there. Ethan heard her voice and hurried to the gate, his face lighting up. For the first time in weeks, a genuine smile crossed his lips. "Maya," he said, gripping the bars, "you came!" She grinned back. "Of course I did. You didn't think I'd let those jerks win, did you?" From that day, Maya became a regular visitor. She would sneak away from the streets where she lived and spend afternoons with Ethan in the Blackwood Gardens. At first, the staff looked at her with suspicion. Her worn clothes and muddy shoes clashed with the polished marble floors. But Ethan defended her fiercely.
"She's my friend," he declared, his voice strong despite his usual shyness. In Maya's presence, Ethan transformed. They played chess under the oak tree, raced through the gardens, Ethan on his crutches, Maya cheering him on, and told stories about worlds where no one judged them for what they lacked. For Maya, those afternoons were a taste of a life she had never known: safety, laughter, and food that didn't come from a dumpster. Yet she never asked for pity, never begged for help. She only gave Ethan what no one else could: the feeling of being normal. One evening, as the sun dipped low and painted the sky gold, Ethan asked the question that had been on his mind. "Maya, why did you help me that day? You didn't even know me." She shrugged, plucking at a blade of grass. "Because I know what it feels like, to be shoved aside, to be treated like you don't belong. I wasn't going to watch them do it to you, too." Ethan tilted his head. "What do you mean?" Maya hesitated. For a moment, her fiery eyes dimmed and the weight of her hidden world surfaced. "I don't have a house, Ethan. Not like this. I live wherever I can. Me and my little brother Liam, we sleep in an old building downtown. Some nights it's so cold I hug him all night just to keep him warm. And when people see us, they don't see kids, they see trash." Ethan's heart clenched. He had always felt like an outsider because of his leg, but he had never known the hunger and fear Maya lived with every day. "You're not trash," he said firmly, his voice shaking with conviction. "You're the bravest person I know." Maya gave him a small smile, but her eyes shone with unshed tears. While the Blackwood estate became a place of healing for Ethan, the city beyond its gates was far less kind to Maya. Every night she returned to the abandoned building where she and Liam slept. The walls were cracked, the roof leaking, the streets outside filled with danger. She worked odd jobs, collecting bottles, sweeping shop floors, sometimes even singing for coins at the train station. But it was never enough. One cold night, Liam coughed violently, his thin body shivering. Maya wrapped him in her arms, whispering, "Hold on, Liam. I'll fix this, I promise." Tears burned her eyes, but she didn't let him see. She couldn't afford to show weakness, not when he depended on her to be strong. Back at the estate, Richard finally confronted Maya one afternoon. He found her in the garden with Ethan, both laughing as they painted silly faces on fallen leaves. "Maya," he said gently, "may I speak with you?" She froze, half expecting to be told she wasn't welcome anymore. But Richard's expression was not cold, it was searching. "Ethan tells me you don't have a home," he continued softly. "Is that true?" Maya's shoulders stiffened. "We manage." Richard sighed. For years, he had believed money solved problems. But here was a child who had slipped through every system of safety, surviving on pure will. "You've given my son something I could not give. You've given him courage, and for that, I owe you more than I can say." Maya lowered her eyes. "I didn't do it for you. I did it because it was right." Richard smiled faintly. He reminded him of someone, himself, years ago when he had clawed his way out of poverty. But just as light had begun to seep into Ethan's world, darkness loomed again. One evening, Richard received a call from the academy board. Not only had they expelled Ethan, but they were now whispering that the Blackwood heir was a liability. Rumors spread through the elite circles. Parents didn't want their children influenced by him. At a charity gala, Richard overheard cruel words. masked behind polite smiles. Such a shame, with all his money, and yet, poor boy, not fit for our standards. The whispers cut deep, but what enraged him most was the school's response when he confronted them again. Mr. Blackwood, we suggest you seek alternative education. Your son's presence here only causes unrest. Unrest, as though Ethan's existence was a disruption. Richard slammed his fist on the desk. You'll regret this! But deep down, he feared the school's cruelty would scar Ethan forever. And then, the unimaginable happened. One afternoon, as Ethan and Maya sat outside sketching pictures in the garden, a black car pulled up at the gate. Out stepped a stern-looking woman in a gray suit, carrying a file under her arm. The guard escorted her to Richard, who met him in the marble foyer. Mr. Blackwood, she said crisply, I'm from Child Protective Services. We've received a report. Richard stiffened. A report? About what? The eyes flicked toward the garden, where Ethan and Maya laughed together. A homeless girl has been seen frequenting your estate. Concerns have been raised about her influence and your son's well-being. Richard's blood ran cold. He had expected judgment from the world, but now it seemed Maya's very presence had put both children in danger. And this was only the beginning.
The woman from Child Protective Services stood like a statue in the Blackwood foyer, her file clutched firmly against her chest. Her voice was clipped, official, leaving no room for emotion. Mr. Blackwood, we've received multiple complaints regarding a homeless girl frequently visiting your estate. Concerns have been raised about possible risks, both for her safety and for your son's. Richard's jaw tightened. Her name is Maya, and she's no risk. She's the reason my son has hope again. The woman raised a brow. That may be true from your perspective, but from ours, allowing an unsupervised minor from the streets into this environment raises questions. Ethan, who had overheard from the garden, hobbled in on his crutches, his voice trembling but strong. She's my friend. You can't take her away. The agent softened slightly at the boy's desperation, but held firm. Friendship aside, the child's situation is unstable. We need to ensure both children's well-being. Her words sliced through the air, leaving Richard with a choice: fight for Maya to stay, or risk losing her forever. That evening, the mansion felt colder than ever. Ethan sat on the stairs, hugging his knees, his face buried in his arms. Dad, he whispered, they can't take Maya away. She's the only one who makes me feel normal. Richard sat beside him, resting a heavy hand on his shoulder. They won't, I promise. But even as he spoke, doubt gnawed at him. Promises didn't bend laws. Promises didn't silence gossip. And the gossip was growing louder. At the next board meeting of the academy, Richard walked into a room filled with polished suits and false smiles. Whispers trailed behind him like shadows. Blackwood's boy, expelled for weakness? And now, associating with a vagrant girl? Is this what our academy should be connected to? Richard clenched his fists under the table. He had once commanded respect in this room. His investments, his philanthropy, his wealth made him untouchable. But now, with his disabled son branded as a liability and his reputation tarnished by Maya's presence, they treated him like a man who had lost control of his own household. The principal, smug behind his spectacles, leaned forward. Mr. Blackwood, perhaps you should consider private tutoring. Your son's circumstances are disruptive to our institution's values.
Richard's voice cut like steel. "Your institution's values are rotten. My son's only crime is existing." Gasps rippled around the table, but Richard didn't care. He walked out, leaving behind the poisonous whispers of privilege. Meanwhile, Maya's world grew even more fragile. After CPS's visit, she became wary of going to the Blackwood estate. She feared being seen, being reported again, being torn away from the one place that felt safe. But Ethan wouldn't let her vanish. One afternoon, he limped all the way to the old abandoned building where she and Liam lived. The cracked windows and peeling paint loomed like scars of forgotten lives. "Maya!" he called. She appeared at the doorway, shock flashing in her eyes. "Ethan! You shouldn't be here!" He shrugged, leaning on his crutch. "If you can risk coming to my world, I can risk coming to yours." Inside, Ethan saw Liam, pale, coughing, his little frame curled on a thin blanket. The sight made Ethan's chest tighten. He realized then just how much Maya carried on her young shoulders. "You can't keep living like this," Ethan whispered. Maya's eyes hardened. "And what choice do I have? No one cares about kids like us." Ethan shook his head. "I care. My dad cares. We'll fight for you." For the first time, Maya's armor cracked, and she let herself believe his words. But society wasn't ready to let them win. At a charity gala the following week, a grand event where chandeliers sparkled and violins played, Richard attended with Ethan by his side. He thought it would be a night to remind people of his family's strength. Instead, it became a stage for cruelty. As Ethan hobbled through the hall on his crutches, whispers rose like a storm. "There's the Blackwood boy. Tragic, isn't it? And that street girl he befriends, disgraceful." Ethan heard every word. His hands trembled, his throat tightened. But then he spotted Maya. She had sneaked in, dressed in a borrowed dress that didn't quite fit, her hair brushed as neatly as she could manage. She stood by the doorway, uncertain but determined, watching him. Their eyes met, and in that instant, Ethan's fear melted away. He turned to the crowd, his voice carrying across the marble hall. "You all think I'm weak because of my leg. You think Maya is worthless because she doesn't have a house. But she's the strongest person here. She saved me more times than you ever will. And if that makes me less in your eyes, then maybe your eyes are broken." Gasps, murmurs, some sneers, some shocked silence. But Richard stood tall behind his son, pride swelling in his chest. For the first time, Ethan had found his voice. But the victory was short-lived. The next morning, Richard was summoned again by Child Protective Services. The woman in gray delivered the blow with practiced detachment. "Mr. Blackwood, after further review, Maya and her brother may be placed into foster care, effective immediately." Ethan's world collapsed. Maya's defiance faltered. Liam clung to her hand, terrified. "No!" Ethan shouted. "She belongs with us!" The woman shook her head. "This is no longer a debate. Tonight, the children will be relocated." The words hung heavy in the air, sealing their fate. That evening, as the sun bled into the horizon, a black van pulled up outside the abandoned building. Officers stepped out, paperwork in hand. Maya clutched Liam tightly, tears streaming down her face. And from the shadows, Ethan and Richard watched helplessly, their hearts breaking as the only hope Ethan had ever known was about to be torn away.
The black van idled at the curb, its engine rumbling like a predator waiting to strike. The CPS officer stepped out with a clipboard in hand, flanked by two uniformed assistants. Their expressions were blank, businesslike, as if removing children from their lives was just another task to tick off a list. Inside the crumbling building, Maya's arms wrapped tightly around Liam.
His tiny body trembled against your chest, his cries muffled into her worn sweater. "Please," she begged, her voice cracking, "don't take him. Don't take us. We're all we have." The officer shook her head. "It's not safe here. This is for your own good." Maya's defiance faltered. She had fought bullies, hunger, cold nights, but this was different. This was the system itself, and it was stronger than her. Ethan broke from his father's grasp and rushed forward, his crutches clattering against the cracked pavement. "You can't take her," he cried. His voice wavered, but his eyes burned with fire. "She's my best friend. She saved me when no one else would. If you take her away, you're not saving her. You're destroying us both." The officer froze for a moment, startled by the boy's raw plea. But then her professional mask returned. "Ethan, I'm sorry. This is not your decision." Richard's fists clenched at his sides. He had spent his life bending governments, winning impossible deals, shaping markets with his wealth and influence. Yet here he stood, a billionaire watching his son's world unravel, powerless, until he remembered he was Richard Blackwood, and power was something he had never lacked. "Stop," Richard said firmly, stepping forward. His voice carried the weight of a man used to being obeyed. "You will not take those children tonight." The officer squared her shoulders. "Mr. Blackwood, interfering with a CPS order is a violation of the law. I strongly advise against obstructing us." Richard's eyes hardened. "And I strongly advise you to reconsider. Those children are under my protection now. If the state wants to fight me, they'll do it in court, not on this street." Gasps rippled from the small crowd that had gathered. Neighbors peeked from windows, whispers spreading fast. The officer hesitated, sensing the storm she was walking into. Finally, she sighed. "Very well, Mr. Blackwood, but understand this. Custody decisions aren't made in gardens or back alleys. They're made in courtrooms, and you will lose." That night, back at the Blackwood estate, the air was heavy with tension. Maya and Liam sat at the long dining table, their wide eyes drinking in the chandeliers, the polished silver, the feast set before them. But Maya didn't touch her plate. Her hands fidgeted nervously, her gaze fixed on the darkened windows as though someone might still come for her. Richard leaned forward. "Eat, Maya. No one will take you tonight." Her voice trembled. "But tomorrow?" Richard's silence was answer enough. Ethan reached across the table, squeezing her hand. "We'll fight. Together." Maya's throat tightened. For the first time in years, she allowed herself to feel the fragile spark of hope. The days that followed were a blur of lawyers, paperwork, and media frenzy. The story had leaked. A billionaire standing against the system to protect a homeless girl and her brother. Reporters camped outside the estate gates. Headlines blared. "Millionaire defies CPS, protecting homeless children or playing hero." The Blackwood scandal, disabled heir and street girl friendship under fire. Some praised Richard as a savior. Others mocked him as a man blinded by sentiment. But Richard ignored them all. His focus was singular, keeping Maya and Liam safe. In the quiet moments between legal battles, Ethan and Maya's bond deepened. They studied together, played music in the drawing room, told stories late into the night. Liam, once frail and sickly, began to smile again, his laughter echoing through halls that had long been silent. For Richard, the estate felt alive for the first time since his wife's passing. He saw Ethan blossom under Maya's friendship, and he felt a stirring in himself. A reminder of the boy he once was, scraping his way out of poverty with nothing but grit. But happiness was fragile, and the storm was only beginning. The courtroom was packed the day of the first hearing. Journalists filled the back rows, their cameras flashing as Richard entered with Ethan, Maya, and Liam. Across the aisle, the CPS attorney stood with cold precision, her stack of files towering like a fortress. The judge, a stern woman with silver hair, called the session to order. Today we address the matter of Maya and Liam Carter, minors currently without stable guardianship. The state proposes immediate placement in foster care. Mr. Blackwood seeks temporary custody. We will hear arguments. The CPS attorney rose first. Your Honor, while Mr. Blackwood may be a respected businessman, he is not related to these children, nor trained in foster care. His wealth does not erase the fact that these minors require structured, supervised placement. Murmurs rippled. The argument was logical, airtight. Then Richard stood. His voice carried not just authority, but emotion. Your Honor, these children are not statistics. Maya has shown my son more courage and compassion than any adult in his life. She pulled him from the edge of despair when even I could not. If the system takes her away, it won't save her. It will crush her spirit, and it will destroy my son's progress. I may not be trained in foster care, but I know love, loyalty, and responsibility. That should count for something. The courtroom buzzed. The judge raised a hand for silence, her expression unreadable. As the hearing stretched on, witnesses were called. Teachers from Ethan's old academy spoke coldly of disruptions and unsuitable friendships. CPS painted Maya as unstable, her life on the streets a mark of danger. But then Ethan took the stand. His crutches clicked against the wooden floor as he approached, his small frame dwarfed by the chair. The courtroom hushed. He looked the judge in the eye. I don't care if Maya doesn't have a house. She has a heart. She stood up for me when the whole world laughed at me. And if you take her away, then maybe this world doesn't deserve people like her. Silence. A silence so heavy, it seemed the walls themselves held their breath. The judge cleared her throat. Thank you, Ethan. Richard's heart swelled with pride, but also fear. Would it be enough? The hearing adjourned without a verdict. The judge announced she would review evidence and deliver a decision in 2 weeks. 2 weeks of waiting. 2 weeks of living under the shadow of uncertainty. At the estate, Ethan and Maya tried to live normally, playing chess, reading stories, walking in the garden. But every laugh felt fragile, every moment tinged with the fear that it could all vanish. One evening, as rain pattered against the windows, Maya whispered to Ethan, "What if they take me away?" Ethan squeezed her hand tightly. "Then I'll run away and find you. Nothing can keep us apart." She smiled faintly, though her eyes glistened. Promise? Promise. But the world wasn't finished testing them. One morning, as Richard sat in his study, his phone buzzed with a new headline that made his blood run cold. Anonymous source reveals Maya's mother alive and demands custody. Richard's hand trembled as he read. If this was true, the entire case could collapse. CPS wouldn't need to fight him anymore. A mother's claim would overrule everything. He rushed to the garden where Ethan and Maya played. His voice broke as he spoke the words he had dreaded. "Maya, Someone has come forward. They say they're your mother. The girl froze, her face pale, her world shattering in an instant.
The garden, once a sanctuary of laughter, fell into silence after Richard's words. Maya's face drained of color. Her hands trembled against her knees. "My mother?" she whispered, her voice barely audible. "That can't be. She's gone." Ethan leaned closer, gripping her hand. "Don't believe it, Maya. It could be a lie." But Richard's grim eyes told her otherwise. "Someone has come forward claiming to be your mother. CPS is already investigating. If her claim holds, she'll have legal custody." The fragile world Maya had begun to build shattered around her. 2 days later, the courtroom buzzed with even more reporters than before. The story had exploded in the press. Homeless girl's lost mother returns. Custody battle turns personal. Maya sat stiffly beside Ethan, her fingers twisting the hem of her borrowed dress. Across the aisle, a woman entered. Her dark hair neatly styled, her clothes simple but pressed, her face drawn with a mixture of sorrow and determination. The judge called for order. "We now hear testimony from Miss Catherine Carter, claiming to be the biological mother of Maya and Liam Carter." Gasps rippled through the crowd. Maya's mouth fell open. "Catherine?" she whispered, her voice barely audible. "That's her name?" Richard studied the woman closely. Something about her didn't sit right. Too polished, too prepared. Catherine's testimony unfolded like a carefully rehearsed play. She claimed she had once been destitute, forced to abandon her children for their own safety. She painted herself as a victim of circumstance, desperate now to reunite with the children she had lost. "I made mistakes," she said, her voice breaking perfectly on cue. "But I never stopped loving Maya and Liam. They're my mother. No one can love them more than I do." Some spectators nodded sympathetically. Even the CPS attorney softened. But Richard's instincts screamed. This woman was too smooth, too calculating. Maya, however, was torn. Her eyes searched Catherine's face, desperate for truth. "Did you really leave us because you loved us?" Maya asked, her voice shaking. Catherine's eyes glistened. "Yes, my darling, I was broken, but now I'm ready to give you the life you deserve." Ethan shot to his feet, anger blazing. "You're lying, Maya. Never needed you. She needed you when she was cold and hungry, when Liam was sick, when she had to fight to survive. Where were you then?" The courtroom gasped at the boy's outburst. The judge banged her gavel. "Order!" But Ethan's words hung in the air, piercing like arrows. During recess, Richard pulled Maya aside. His voice was low, urgent. "Maya, listen to me. Something about her doesn't add up. If she truly abandoned you, why return now, right when this case is gaining headlines?" Maya's eyes brimmed with tears. "But what if she's telling the truth? What if she really is my mother?" Richard softened. "Then we'll find the truth, together." The next week, Richard hired private investigators to dig into Catherine's past. What they uncovered was chilling. Catherine wasn't just a long-lost mother. She had ties to some of Richard's old rivals, men who had hated him for years. And worse, she had been paid large sums in recent weeks, money funneled through shadowy accounts. When Richard confronted her in court, his voice thundered. "Isn't it true, Miss Carter, that you've recently received financial payments from associates of Blackwood Enterprises' competitors?" Her mask cracked. "That's irrelevant," she snapped. The courtroom erupted. The judge silenced the noise, her eyes narrowing. "This accusation will be investigated." But the damage was done. Maya's fragile hope crumbled. Her face hardened as she realized the truth. This woman wasn't here for love. She was here for leverage. That night, in the safety of the estate, Maya sobbed into Ethan's shoulder. "She doesn't love me, Ethan. She never did. I was just useful to her."
Ethan held her tightly. "No, you're not useful, you're priceless, and you don't need her to prove it." Richard stood at the doorway, his heart heavy. He saw now that this wasn't just a fight for guardianship, it was a battle for Maya's very sense of worth. The trial dragged on for weeks. CPS pressed their argument, Catherine played the part of a repentant mother, and Richard fought tooth and nail with his lawyers. Meanwhile, Ethan began to change. Inspired by Maya's courage, he grew bolder, speaking out in interviews, defending her publicly. "People think Maya is just a homeless girl, but she's stronger than anyone I've ever met. She saved me, and I'll never stop fighting to save her." His words spread online, shared by thousands. For the first time, the public began to shift. The story wasn't just about scandal anymore. It was about resilience, friendship, and justice. But Catherine wasn't finished. Desperate, she made a final move. One evening, Maya vanished. Her bed empty, her shoes gone. Panic ripped through the Blackwood estate. "Where is she?" Ethan cried, his chest heaving. A note lay on the pillow. "Don't follow me. I need to know the truth." Richard's stomach dropped. Catherine had gotten to her. The scene cut to a dim-lit motel on the edge of the city. Catherine sat across from Maya, her tone smooth, coaxing. "You don't belong with them, Maya. Richard wants to use you to make himself look good. But I'm your real family. Come with me. We'll start fresh." Maya's fists clenched. For a moment, doubt clouded her. Was Catherine right? Could she risk trusting her heart again? Then she thought of Ethan, his trembling voice in the garden, his defiance in the gala, his promise that nothing could separate them. "No," Maya said firmly, her voice trembling with strength. "Family doesn't abandon you. You left me when I needed you most. Richard and Ethan didn't. They're my family now." Catherine's face twisted with rage. "You ungrateful brat." She lunged forward, but before anything could happen, the door burst open. Richard stood there with officers, Ethan behind him, his eyes wide with relief. "Maya!" Ethan cried. She ran to him, collapsing into his arms. Richard's voice was thunder. "Catherine Carter, you're under arrest for fraud, extortion, and endangerment of a minor." The officer seized her as she screamed curses, her carefully crafted mask finally torn away. The courtroom days later was tense but decisive. The judge's gavel struck, echoing like a drum of finality. In light of overwhelming evidence, the petition by Catherine Carter is denied. Furthermore, custody of Maya and Liam Carter is hereby granted to Mr. Richard Blackwood. The gallery erupted. Ethan hugged Maya fiercely. Liam clapped his small hands, laughing with joy. Richard's eyes glistened, his stoic mask broken at last. For the first time in years, the Blackwood estate was not just a house, it was a home. But as the family embraced, the judge added one final note. "Mr. Blackwood, guardianship is granted, but adoption will require further steps. Until then, Maya and Liam remain wards of your care." The future was theirs, but not yet secure. And just as the family began to settle into a fragile peace, a sealed envelope arrived in the mail. Inside, a single sentence from the adoption agency. "We have discovered new information regarding Maya and Liam's true parentage."
The letter trembled in Richard's hands as silence filled the study. Ethan, Maya, and little Liam stared at him, their eyes wide with fear and curiosity. "What does it say?" Ethan asked, his voice barely above a whisper. Richard exhaled slowly, his face pale. "It says they've uncovered new information about Maya and Liam's true parentage." Maya's heart pounded. After everything, the lies, the courtroom battles, the betrayal, could there really be more? The next morning, Richard and the children sat in a quiet office at the adoption agency. A social worker laid out a file, her expression both gentle and grave. Maya, Liam. She began softly. We did extensive background checks after Catherine Carter's claims collapsed. What we found changes things. She turned to Maya. Your mother did abandon you, but your father, he's alive. The room spun. Maya's heart pounded. Maya's breath caught in her throat. My father? The woman nodded. He's been searching for you for years. He never stopped. Ethan's jaw dropped. Richard's hand clenched tightly on the armrest. A week later, the reunion was arranged. In a quiet park, beneath the shade of tall oaks, Maya and Liam waited nervously. Ethan held her hand, whispering encouragement. Then a man approached. His hair was streaked with grey, his face weathered, but his eyes were the same shade as Maya's. Maya, Liam, he said, his voice breaking. Maya froze, tears spilling down her cheeks. Dad! He dropped to his knees, arms open. Maya and Liam rushed forward, colliding into him with sobs that shook the ground. I'm so sorry, he wept. I never abandoned you. I was told you were gone, that your mother had taken you far away. I searched, but I could never find you, until now. For the first time in her life, Maya felt the warmth of her father's embrace. But Richard stood at a distance, his heart heavy. He had fought so hard to protect these children. Now, in the span of a week, he faced the possibility of losing them. Ethan noticed and squeezed his father's hand. Dad, she still needs us. He may be her father, but you've been the one here. Don't give up on her now. Richard swallowed, emotions threatening to break his usually stoic facade. The custody hearing was reopened. Maya's biological father, Daniel Carter, testified with tears, sharing proof of his long search. His sincerity was undeniable. The court recognized his rights. But when the judge asked Maya where she wanted to live, the room fell silent. She glanced at Daniel, her true father, then at Richard, the man who fought for her when no one else did, and finally at Ethan, the boy who never let her face the world alone. I don't want to choose, Maya said, her voice steady but trembling. Family isn't about blood, it's about love. My dad, Daniel, he's my father, but Richard is too, and Ethan, he's my brother. The judge leaned forward. Maya, the law requires a guardian, but your voice matters. Tell us where you feel safe. Maya closed her eyes, then spoke firmly. I want to stay with Richard, but I want my father in my life too. I won't lose either of them. The courtroom buzzed. It was unprecedented, but Richard rose, addressing the judge. Your Honor, I will gladly share guardianship with Daniel. This isn't about pride. It's about what's best for Maya and Liam. If having both of us gives them strength, then so be it. Daniel stood, tears streaming. Agreed, we'll raise them together. They deserve more than one father. They deserve a family. The judge smiled faintly. Very well. Shared guardianship granted. This court recognizes Maya and Liam Carter as children under the care of both Richard Blackwood and Daniel Carter. The gavel fell. Applause broke out. For once, the courtroom wasn't a battlefield, it was a place of healing. Weeks later, the Blackwood estate transformed. Where once there had been tension and emptiness, now there was laughter and life. Daniel moved into a nearby home, spending days with Maya and Liam, while Richard remained their legal anchor. The two men, once strangers, became unlikely allies, bound by their love for the same children. And Ethan. Ethan changed the most. No longer the shy, self-conscious boy afraid of stairs, he stood
tall with his crutches, his head held high. He spoke openly about his struggles, inspiring others. At school, kids who once mocked him now admired his courage. One evening, as the sun set over the garden where it all began, Ethan turned to Maya. "Do you realize something?" he asked with a smile. "What?" she said, tilting her head. "We both started out broken. You homeless, me rejected. But look at us now. We didn't just find family, we built one." Maya smiled, her eyes shining, and no one can take that away. The video would end with a sweeping shot of the family. Richard and Daniel talking in the background, Liam playing with toy cars on the grass, Ethan balancing proudly on his crutches, and Maya looking out at the horizon. Strong, no longer the lost, frightened girl she once was. Her voice would close the story. "They tried to expel us, they tried to break us, but in the end, we found something stronger than power, stronger than wealth, stronger than fear. We found family." Fade out.